My parents ruined my life for money. If anyone had told me a year ago that my parents would sacrifice my happiness, my freedom, and everything I'd ever wanted for the sake of money, I would have laughed. Growing up, they always said that love and family came first, that they'd do anything to see me happy. But I was naive then, still seeing them through rose-colored glasses. The truth was like a slap in the face, a truth that slowly unraveled over the course of my senior year, and ultimately left me with nothing. It all started with the college application process. I had worked for years to get into my dream school, a small liberal arts college on the East Coast. I was practically obsessed with it, spending hours researching the professors, the campus clubs, and the internships in the area. My parents had always seemed supportive. They'd even toured the school with me, but as soon as the acceptance letter came in the mail, I noticed a shift. One evening, as I was in my room working on my art portfolio, my mom knocked on the door, her expression tense. "Hey, sweetie," she said, stepping in and sitting on the edge of my bed. "Can we talk?" I turned away from my sketches, frowning. "About what?" She sighed, like she was preparing herself. "Your dad and I? We've been discussing some things. We know you got into Scripps, and we're really proud of you, but we're worried about the cost." I stared at her, shocked. "Mom, you said you'd saved up for my college since I was little. I mean, you knew Scripps was my dream school." She nodded quickly. "Yes, but honey, life changes. You know that we've had some financial difficulties with Dad's business and, well, we have to be realistic." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. "So, what are you saying? We've talked about some alternatives," she continued, her voice unnaturally cheerful. "You know, there's the local state university. They're offering you a scholarship. And it's only an hour away, so you could stay home. Isn't that wonderful?" I sat there in silence, feeling betrayed. Staying home had never been part of my plan, and they knew it. Going to Scripps was my chance to finally explore my independence and dive into the arts community that I dreamed about every night. But even as I tried to protest, I saw the determined look in my mother's eyes. Days turned into weeks, and the arguments became a nightly ritual. My dad, normally calm and reasonable, would raise his voice, his face red with frustration. "Sophia," he'd say, "you're being selfish. The world doesn't revolve around your dreams. We're doing what's best for the family." I hated that phrase. What's best for the family? It was code for what's best for them. I tried pleading with them, explaining how much I'd looked forward to this, how hard I'd worked to get into Scripps. But their responses became more manipulative, more calculating. They'd bring up how much money they'd spent raising me, how many sacrifices they'd made for my sake. It was exhausting, and little by little, I felt my dreams slipping out of my reach. But one night, things escalated in a way I never expected. I was sitting at the dinner table, picking at my food, when my dad cleared his throat. "Sophia," he began slowly, "we've made a decision." The way he said it made my heart sink. I could already feel the blow coming. "We've accepted an offer for you," he continued. "A position at Hightower Holdings. You'll be working as a personal assistant to the CEO, Mr. Hightower, starting in 2 weeks. My fork clattered onto my plate. "What? You accepted a job for me? Are you s?" My mom placed a hand on my arm, as though to soften the blow. "Sophia, it's a fantastic opportunity. Mr. Hightower is one of the most powerful people in the industry. Imagine how much you could learn from him." I shook my head, my voice trembling. "Learn from him? Mom, I just graduated from high school. I'm not interested in working in some corporate job. I want to go to college." "But this is even better than college," she insisted. "You'll be making money, gaining experience." "Experience in what? Being someone's assistant?" I laughed bitterly, realizing how absurd it all sounded. "I want to study art. You know that." "Art?" my dad scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You think you're going to make a living off that? This job could open doors for you. Doors you wouldn't even get near with an art degree." "But it's not what I want." I was almost shouting now. "I didn't even agree to this. I don't want this job." My mom's face hardened. "You don't have a choice, Sophia. We've already accepted the offer. Mr. Hightower is expecting you." That was the moment I felt my whole world shift. They were serious. They'd actually given away my future like it was some cheap trade. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I barely spoke to them, numb from the betrayal. I'd lost track of how many times I'd tried to change their minds, but every conversation led to the same cold wall. I knew there was more to the story, that my parents were hiding something. They were desperate, but it wasn't just about money for college. I could feel it. On the day before I was supposed to start at Hightower Holdings, I overheard them talking in hushed voices in the living room. "Are you sure we made the right decision?" my mom asked, sounding nervous. "Do you want to lose the house?" my dad hissed back. "This is the only way. Hightower's practically throwing us a lifeline." "Yeah, but at what cost?" She sounded more guilty than I'd ever heard her. "She doesn't want this, Mark." "She'll be fine," my dad said dismissively. "In a few months, she'll thank us." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They were using me to get themselves out of debt. I was nothing but a bargaining chip. That night, I confronted them. They were in the living room, huddled together on the couch, discussing some last-minute arrangements for my new job, completely unaware that I'd overheard their conversation. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room. "You're selling me off to save yourselves, aren't you?" They both looked up, startled, like two guilty kids caught in the act. My mother's face paled, and my father's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, Sophia?" my dad said, trying to sound calm. But there was a flicker of panic in his eyes. "I heard you both talking earlier," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You're doing this because you need money, right? You're using me as some kind of lifeline." My mother looked down, her fingers twisting anxiously. My dad, however, straightened up, his expression hardening. "You don't understand, Sophia," he said, his tone dismissive. "This isn't as simple as you think." "Then explain it to me," I shot back. "Tell me why you think it's okay to ruin my life for the sake of money." He sighed, rubbing his forehead as if this were some huge inconvenience. "It's not about ruining your life, Sophia. It's about giving you an opportunity. An opportunity we never had. Working with someone like Mr. Hightower, that's a once-in-a-lifetime chance." "Oh, don't even try to make this sound noble," I snapped. "This isn't about me. It's about you, about the debt you got yourselves into. You're sacrificing my future because you're too scared to deal with the consequences of your own." My mom looked up then, her face twisted with guilt. "Sophia, please. We've done everything we can. Your father. He's done everything to keep this family afloat. If it weren't for him." "For him?" I interrupted, incredulous. "You mean, if it weren't for his terrible investments and reckless spending?" My dad's face flushed with anger. "Watch your tone, young lady," he said coldly. "I will not," I shouted, the words spilling out of me. "You've lied to me, manipulated me, and now you're trying to trap me into something I don't want, all because you're too proud to admit you messed up." They both fell silent, staring at me with a mixture of shock and anger. I felt a bitter satisfaction rising in me. For once, I was the one holding them accountable. After a long silence, my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We didn't have a choice, Sophia. We're drowning in debt, and this job. It's our only way out. Mr. Hightower agreed to cover our debts if you work for him for at least 2 years. 2 years, honey, that's all he's asking." 2 years? I repeated, stunned. "You agreed to put me in a job I didn't want for 2 years without even asking me?" She nodded, and her face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I thought we were doing the right thing." I was too furious to feel sorry for her. "You didn't even care what I wanted," I said quietly. "You just saw me as a solution to your problem." My dad's face softened a little, but I wasn't interested in any more explanations or justifications. I turned and walked toward the door, ignoring my mother's tearful plea to stay. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling utterly alone. I had no money of my own, no real plan, and nowhere else to go. Every time I thought about what they'd done, I felt another wave of anger and betrayal. But in the morning, as the first light slipped through my curtains, a strange sense of calm settled over me. They'd made a decision without me, taken away my choice. But that didn't mean I was powerless. I still had one choice left, and it was mine to make. When I came downstairs, my parents were already awake, waiting for me at the breakfast table, looking exhausted. My mom's face lit up a little when she saw me, like she thought I'd come down to forgive them. "Sophia," she began, her voice hopeful, "we know this isn't what you wanted, but—" "I'm leaving," I said flatly. They both stared at me, stunned. "What do you mean, you're leaving?" my dad asked, his voice thick with shock. "I mean I'm moving out. I can't live here anymore, not after what you've done." My mom's face went white. "Sophia, don't be ridiculous. Where will you go?" I shrugged. "I'll figure it out. I'll find a job, maybe apply to Scripps next year. But I can't stay here and pretend like everything's okay." They exchanged a desperate look. "You're making a mistake," my dad said, his tone angry again. "You don't understand what you're doing." "No, you don't understand," I replied. "I'm done letting you control my life. I don't care what happens to the house or to Dad's business or any of it. I need to live my life on my own terms." My mom reached out, her eyes filling with tears. "Sophia, please. We're your parents. We love you." "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this," I said, my voice hard. And with that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving them both staring after me in silence. The next few weeks were brutal. I moved in with a friend who offered me her spare room, picked up a job waiting tables, and began piecing together a new life. Some days, I felt like I was barely holding it together, but I reminded myself that this was my choice, my freedom, and that was worth everything. I knew I couldn't afford Scripps now, but I started applying to other schools, looking into scholarships and grants. It was daunting, but it was also liberating. For the first time, I was making decisions for myself, no strings attached. Months passed, and I kept my distance from my parents. They called occasionally, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry, but I never called back. I was still healing, still too hurt to face them. Then, one evening, just as I was getting ready to leave my shift at the restaurant, my mom showed up, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. She stood by the hostess stand, wringing her hands nervously. "Sophia, can we talk?" she asked softly. I felt a surge of mixed emotions, anger, pity, exhaustion. But I nodded, motioning her to follow me outside. We walked in silence to the edge of the parking lot, the night air crisp and cold. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I know we made a terrible mistake. We were so desperate, and we didn't know what else to do. I wish we could go back." I looked at her, studying her face. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but I'd learned the hard way that apologies didn't fix everything. "I appreciate that, Mom," I said finally. "But I can't just go back to the way things were. What you did, it changed everything." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I understand. I just wanted to see you, to tell you how proud I am. You're stronger than I ever was." The words caught me off guard, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of compassion. She was flawed, deeply so, but maybe she was learning from her mistakes. "Thanks, Mom," I said quietly. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I'll figure it out." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and we stood there in silence for a while, just two people trying to mend something broken. I didn't know if I'd ever fully forgive her, or if our relationship would ever heal. But I knew one thing for sure, I was finally free, building a future that was mine and mine alone. And that was worth every painful step.